Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Whose Bhagavad Gita is this? Looks like the older edition. So we're reading from the Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 5, text number 1. Arjuna Vacha Sanyasam Karmanam Krishna Punya Yogam Cha Samshasi Yatshayati Yarekam Tanme Bruhi Sanischitam Arjuna Vacha Sanyasam Karmanam Krishna Punaryogam Cha Samshasi Yatschayati or Ekam Tane Bruhi Sanischitam Vacha Samkarmanam Krishna Punya Yoga Cha Samshasi Shayati Orekam Kame Bruhi Sunishchitam
Arjuna
Vacha
Sanyasam Karmanam Krishna
Sanyasam Karmanam Krishna
Punaryogam Cha Shamsasi
Punaryogam Cha Samshasi Yatstrayati Orekam Tame Bruhi Sanischitam. Matajis. A little louder. Arjuna Vacha Sanyasam Karmanam Krishna Punayoga Cha Samshasi Yatshayati Orekam Tame Bruhi Sanischitam. Arjuna Vacha. Arjuna said, Sanyasam, renunciation, Karmanam, of all activities, Krishna, O Krishna, Punar, again, Yogam, devotional service, Cha, also, Samshasi, you are praising, Yat, which, Shreya, is more beneficial, Etayo, of these two, Ekam, one, Tat, that, May, unto me, Bruhi, please tell, Sunishchitam, definitely. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. Arjuna said, O Krishna, first of all you asked me to renounce work, and then again you recommend work with devotion. Now you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial. Purport, in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that work and devotional service is better than dry mental speculation. Devotional service is easier than the latter because being transcendental in nature, it frees one from reaction. In the 2nd chapter, preliminary knowledge of the soul and its entanglement in the material body were explained. How to get out of this material engagement by Buddha Yoga or devotional service was also explained therein. In the 3rd chapter is explained that a person who is situated on the platform of knowledge no longer has any duties to perform. And in the 4th chapter, the Lord told Arjuna that all kinds of sacrificial work culminate in knowledge. However, at the end of the 4th chapter, the Lord advised Arjuna to wake up and fight, being situated in perfect knowledge. Therefore, by simultaneously stressing the importance of both work and devotion and inaction and knowledge, Krishna has perplexed Arjuna and confused his determination. Arjuna understands that renunciation in knowledge involves cessation of all kinds of work performed as sense activities. But if one performs work in devotional service, then how is work stopped? In other words, he thinks that sannyas, or renunciation in knowledge, should be altogether free from all kinds of activity, because work and renunciation appear to him to be incompatible. He appears not to have understood that work in full knowledge is non-reactive and is therefore the same as inaction. He inquires therefore whether he should cease work altogether or work with full knowledge. Arjuna vacha sanyasam karmanam krishna punya yoga cha samchasi yatschaya etiyor ekam tanmai bruhi sinishchitam. Arjuna said, O Krishna, first of all you asked me to renounce work, and then again you recommend work with devotion. Now you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial. Namo Vishnuvaraya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tiramane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskyatyade Siddharne. In the Varnashram system, there's a gradual progression from being a Shudra to a Vaishya to a Kshatriya to a Brahmin. Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said, when he was going in the village and getting all kinds of contributions from the different shopkeepers. So he came to one shopkeeper, one place, and there was a learned astrologer there. The learned astrologer could predict all kinds of everyone's future. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked him, my dear learned scholar, Pandit, can you tell me what I was in my past lives? So the Pandit went into meditation because he was a genuine mystic. And then he saw in his meditation, he saw this boar picking up Bhumandala. And then he saw this tortoise with Mount Miro on top of it. And the demigods and the demons were churning it with Vasuki as a churning rod. So he became a little confused. He said, well, actually, I'm having a bad day. Maybe you can come back tomorrow, maybe I could do better. So he said, no, just think a little bit more. So he went back into meditation, and he saw this man with his chopper killing millions of people. Then he saw this green man with a bow and arrow slaying all these Rakshasas. Then he said, actually, I know who you are. You're the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, no, actually, I know who I was in my past lifetime. Then in my past lifetime, I was a cowherd boy. And because I was very diligent in herding the cows, therefore in this lifetime I've become a Brahmin. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu confirms that if you act in a certain varna very nicely, then you can be elevated to the higher realms of material existence, such as realizing Brahman, which is what a Brahmana is supposed to be. But in order to realize Brahman, one has to cease material activities. It begins with Jayate, Janmana Jayate Shudra. By birth, everyone is born a Shudra. That is born in the Bali concept of life. Janmana Jayate Shudra. And then by samskara bhavat dvija. Then there is this, by samskar, by some rituals, one may get a clue that actually there's something more to life than just the material existence. And by such inspiration, illumination, Veda, Panta, Bhavat, Vipra, then one may study the Vedas after becoming second initiated, second born, and then become learned. Learned means Vidya Vinaya Sampane, Brahmaniga Vihastani, Shuni Chaiva, Swapake Cha, Pandita Samadarshana. one may be able to see how all living entities are spiritual beings. And inside every body is the soul along with the super soul. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram vinasyava vinashatam yak pashati sapashati. One who can see the Supreme Soul accompanying all beings and knows that neither the soul within or the super soul within the destructible body is ever destroyed, actually sees. So this is called Brahma Janatiti Brahmanaha. One becomes a Brahman. That's the vision of a Brahman. Now, in order to come to that platform, one works, but generally one works on the higher platform by giving up activities, especially the Brahmins. They cease all kinds of activities. And then the sannyasi, then, as Krishna has explained in the 6th chapter, that nashitya karma phulam karma karma karotiya. So sannyasi chan ninaragnirna chakriya. That one who renounces the fruits of his work and works as he's obligated is actually in the renounced order of life. That he who lights no fire and performs no work. In other words, one who renounces his work for the Supreme, one works, but his activities are done on behalf of the Supreme, then he's actually in the renounced order of life. The example, of course, is if you go to the bank, because nowadays you probably can't get to the bank, it's probably not even open. But if you go to the bank and you walk into the bank of, say, Slovenia, is there a bank called the Bank of Slovenia? Gransky Bank. That, what's that?
New Ljubljana Bank.
Well, Gransky is called Grenska Bank. Grenska. And you walk in and you say, I renounce all the money here, you can have it all back. Now, probably the people from behind the cashier, they probably won't come and thank you very much, you're so kind. No, they'll probably call the police and they'll come and take you away. Because you can't renounce something you never had. Similarly, in the material world, this idea of renunciation is false because we can't renounce something that we don't have. If we never possessed anything, then there's no question of renouncing it. So knowledge actually means to gradually realize that we don't have anything, and therefore renunciation is out of the question. But real renunciation is renunciation of the material concept of life and acceptance of the actual spiritual concept of life, that everything is Krishna's and should be utilized for Krishna. That's actually renunciation. Otherwise it's called Palgo Vairagya Uchite. Nibandha Krishna Sambandhe Yukta Anasaktasya Vishayan Itahu Upayunjitaha Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yukta Vairagya Uchite. That the renunciation of things which are meant for Krishna's service is not true renunciation. It's when everything is actually dovetailed for Krishna's service, and that's actually proper renunciation. So Arjuna doesn't seem to understand that at this particular point. He thinks that the idea is to gain knowledge. And of course the idea is to gain knowledge. In order to do that, one has to give up hankering and lamentation and see everyone equally. And that really doesn't depend upon activity, it depends upon the cultivation of knowledge. Brahman realization means ultimately to renounce material activities, to stop them, and to concentrate on Brahman. So that's stopping material activities. But Krishna consciousness goes beyond Brahman realization. It means to actively participate in utilizing whatever we have under our influence in Krishna's service as Krishna's instrument. And then Brahman, being the negation of the material existence, requires the negation of activity. But Krishna consciousness means the realization of spiritual existence, requires that we utilize all the energies in Krishna's service to realize that everything is actually spiritual. For the materialist, he thinks that a rope is actually a snake. And when he realizes it's a rope, then he becomes fearless. So similarly, when one realizes one is eternal, then one becomes fearless and is no longer afraid of the material world. But when one sees the material world positively in relationship to Krishna and wants to utilize it in Krishna's service, then he's above simply material abnegation. He's actually positively on the platform of love for Krishna. So Arjuna doesn't seem to understand that when things are utilized in Krishna's service, then one is no longer subjected to the reaction, and the reaction is actually our consciousness is covered by the illusory entity. That's the main reaction. And we forget who we actually are. But when one utilizes things in Krishna's service and becomes conscious of Krishna, then one realizes oneself, realizes everything as it actually is, and therefore there's actually no more entanglement in the modes of material nature, which is the main aspect of material existence. Thinking that we're this body, thinking that people are acting independently of Krishna, just like now we find that the Western world is in crisis, as if it wasn't in crisis before. Everything was going fine. The new iPhones were coming out every year. They were going to make Avatar 2 soon. Everything was all right. So now people are thinking things are not all right. But actually they're never all right. But, as I said before, they're probably closer to be all right, because now people have less toys to play with, and maybe they'll take Krishna consciousness more seriously. We find in places where, just like when I first went to Poland, that was 1990, in the early 90s. And at that time there were no, you drive in the car on the road, there were practically no roads, what to speak of cars on the road. There were horses and buggies. There was no advertisement because there was nothing to advertise. They couldn't sell it, there was nothing to sell, so there was no advertising. And if you put up a poster, like we used to do, then 50 people would come to your program. You put it up one day, next day 50 people would come. And when Indradyumna Maharaj was doing more extensive, he'd get 200-300 people, just in a few days of advertisement. And now, you can have it advertised on television, you're lucky you get 50 people coming. Because they're so distracted to get their new iPhone, to get their new car, their computer, their vacation in somewhere. So people have become so distracted, they don't think, well, we don't need Krishna. Because we have material advancement and it's going to get better. Technology is advancing, everything is getting better and better. So what do we need Krishna for? But when all the toys are taken away and there's nothing, then they turn back to Krishna. As Vaishnav was saying, did you get that letter I sent? Okay. Some of the devotees in California, because there's martial law everywhere, practically speaking. You can't go out of your house. So people are in homes. And so the devotees were going door to door, and they said book distribution picked up greatly because people have nothing to do. They can watch the same old soap opera, but it's not so entertaining anymore. So they're actually welcome the devotees, and they're glad to buy the books. They have something to read now. So when the fever of material existence goes down, when people are not hankering for material enjoyment, material progress, then their receptivity for Krishna consciousness increases. Even at the colleges in America especially, the students realize that actually they're wasting their time. First of all, you go to college, it's undergraduate work, and everything you learn is just useless, generally speaking. You're going to forget it. You just memorize something for the test, and then afterwards, you just try to forget it because it's useless. Actually, I remember what I learned I took psychology in school. I remember it all. And even though I remember it, it's useless because it's all wrong. Not all wrong, it just doesn't really apply to reality, to our reality. So, but at the end, when I went to college, I was paying $500 a semester, which was paid for by a scholarship, because $500 was worth more. So by the time I could finish college, I owed absolutely nothing. But nowadays, you go to college, some colleges, it's like $50,000 a semester. So by the time you're done, you have a debt of $500,000. And then you have to pay interest on it. So you spend the rest of your life trying to pay off your college. You're working just to pay off your college. Maybe you can get an apartment or something. Your wife is working, you're working, the children are working, the dog's working. The dog is during the day, he's a watchdog. He gets a certain salary. Everyone's working just to pay off the mortgage, the debt for the car, and the student loan. By the time you die, you just have enough money for the coffin. And even that you may have to pay off over time. So the students realize that, here we're just, of course when I went to college, the idea was you stayed in college so you can avoid the draft. Otherwise you'd have to go and fight some completely useless war. Part of the reason for the war is to kill off all the useless people. So, you stayed in college, but nowadays, people, there's no war going on, at least not exactly, there's no draft going on, there's nothing to avoid. You're just accumulating debt, and at the end, you get the same job you would have gotten probably if you didn't go to college. Because everyone goes to college. I remember I had one friend, he got his PhD, and he tried to get a job. No one would hire him because he was overqualified. So he was working as a dishwasher in a restaurant. Actually, he was working in a steel mill. He was in Buffalo, he was working in a steel factory. So the point is, when the fever of material existence goes down, people actually become more receptive to Krishna consciousness. So Krishna arranges that periodically, so that people will actually be able to listen and not become bewildered by all the distractions. In the Vedas, they promise heavenly planets result in good, opulence there, you're going to live forever. People don't believe in the heavenly planets nowadays, but they have full faith in the fairy tales that they see in the movies. They have faith in the sports heroes. They have faith in so many things that they can't do anything, but they just watch these things and they live in their imaginations. They can hardly get up and change the remote, but they're watching people playing football for 2 hours. They couldn't even kick the ball across the room, but they're imagining that they're actually doing so many wonderful things with their body just by watching. But when that's taken away, then they'll become more serious about existence and more inquisitive. So that's what Krishna is doing right now, taking away people's imagination. So I'll stop there. Any questions? Anyone have a nice imagination they want to share with us? Yes.
discussing about one incident when Lord Ramachandra killed a Shudra who was studying Shastras. So
I don't think he ever killed a Shudra. There was something about Ekalavya, who was learning how to become an archer, but he was a Shudra, and he went to Dronacharya, and Dronacharya refused to give him any education. This is in Ramlila, but generally they don't kill Shudras, just for studying the Vedas. But I mean, anyhow, what's the point?
Well, you reminded me what you were saying today in the lecture, that after you take second initiation, then you can study Shastra.
Well, second initiation in the Vedic culture was including the Vaishyas and the Kshatriyas and the Brahmas. Generally, the Kshatriyas and the Brahmas, they went and studied. Krishna didn't really study very much. He just played and herded the cows. But generally second initiation was considered, the sacred thread was given, even Krishna got the sacred thread, as a Kshatriya at least. Yeah, they study the Vedas. The Kshatriyas study the Dhanurveda, while the Brahmins study the Upanishads and other for Brahman realization. But they study the Vedas. The Vaishnavas didn't really have, they got second initiation, they got the sacred thread, but they didn't. The only Vedas they studied the cookbook Veda or something. Is that right? Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. Grandhara Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, or Premanand.